So here we are post-election. We have elected our first female vice president, the first woman of color. And we're also living in this year of firsts, the pandemic. None of us have lived through a pandemic before. There's more wildfires and hurricanes than we've ever seen on record. This has been kind of unprecedented time where we've had to really be resilient as people. And with so many of these firsts, when I think about, our ability and our strength to reinvent ourselves and to really thrive through this change, if not survive, I wanted to find somebody who really resembled that, notion of being so resilient. And so my guest today is Aliza Sherman, and she's just the face of resilience. She's a woman of many firsts. She's an inspiration to me, and you're going to hear more about that in our conversation. She's also a beautiful Latina face, and she graces our website at Gennev.com. If you've been there lately, she is the beautiful, vivacious, smiling woman on our website, and she's coined herself the happy face of menopause, which we'll also talk about in this episode. Aliza Sherman is a writer and a women's health advocate. She co-founded Elementa, a women's wellness company focused on alternative medicines for healing and healing things like menopause symptoms. But her healing medicines are herbals and CBD and cannabis. She's now the new communication specialist for the nonprofit, the Gluten Intolerance Group. She's an author. She's the former art liaison for Def Leppard and Metallica, and she's a force. And so welcome my guest, Aliza Sherman.
All right. And I have my emoji cup.
That's great. What's the emoji for today?
What is today? Thursday? It's happy because we're getting close to
the weekend. That's fantastic. Yeah. That's good. I like it. And I've got my my gamified water drinking jug, which every hour it gives me a little motivation. Right now I'm at don't stop.
Don't stop.
I know.
Keep going. All right, cool.
All right. Well, welcome, Aliza. It's a pleasure to have you here today. First of all, where are you coming to us from today?
I am live from Anchorage, Alaska.
Not many people live in Anchorage, Alaska. What are you from there?
No, I'm not. It's funny because nobody answers my phone calls when they see it's coming from Alaska because they always say, I don't know anyone in Alaska. So I always end up going to voicemail. But I'm here in Alaska. My husband has been a wildlife biologist at U.S. Fish and Wildlife and has moved through various Department of Interior kinds of jobs. And so what better place for somebody who's into wildlife than Alaska?
Yeah, I bet it's beautiful too.
Oh, it's pretty phenomenal, yeah. And I'm a city girl. He's a mountain man. So it has a little bit of both worlds being in Anchorage.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Well, that's great. I'm based in Seattle, so just south of you, not, I guess, kind of as close to Alaska as any, or Anchorage as any other part of the United States is going to get.
Well, actually, it's like a sister city to us, and we always fly Alaska Airlines. It's a hub, so the easiest place to get to the whole United States for us is Seattle.
Seattle, yeah. I love Alaska Airlines, so maybe we'll get them to be a sponsor of that. This in the future.
Hashtag I fly Alaska.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to start off, this podcast with a quote. You've got a lot of amazing kind of quotable things you've said, and you've written a ton, but let's start here. I read this quote in an interview where you said, I come to these places as a woman who knows nothing. And, and I want to share that. And I learned quite quickly, and I want to share how I do that. I remember the not knowing place. Can you talk a little bit about what the not knowing place is?
The not knowing place is that innocence, in some cases, an ignorance. It is the openness and willingness to learn. But it's staying in touch with that, because what tends to happen is as we learn something, we think we know something when truly we know nothing. And by thinking that we know something, we end up closing our minds to anything new and different. We become really rigid in that space. And I find that it's very often with people who adopt technology, for example. You learn how to use the technology, the device, and then you take for granted that first moment when you touch a keyboard and you're afraid it's going to send electric shocks through your hand because it's this electronic thing. Like I remember, I live in that space where when I turned on a computer for the very first time back in the 1980s, it was frightening and exhilarating at the exact same time. But people forget that space. If you are an early adopter and new people come to something that you already know, you skip over the fact that there's this learning curve. And so I stay in that place. I feel that place. And that's how I can, I think, be a better teacher because I remember not knowing. And then I can guide people from the not knowing place, which you can get stuck there and bring them to that place of knowledge. But hopefully they'll always keep an open mind because we're always learning.
Yeah. You know, what I love about that, and you even said the word naive at the start. I often, sometimes if someone asks me, you know, how did you get the courage to do this or that? I always say it came out of being naive. And I think a little bit of being naive is a gift, but it's also admitting that you don't know something. And it takes, I think, courage to be in this not knowing place. What, you know, how do you find the courage to stay present in that place or to go back to it?
Well, I find it to be the most creative place. Other people will use the term thinking out of the box. I always used to respond when they're like, oh, let's do some out of the box thinking. My response was, box? What box? So it's taking all barriers away. So I find it to be more of the sandbox and the playground of creativity. So I also, with everything that I think about, want to do, strive for, if ever I hit my barrier, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I don't understand that. My mantra, my personal mantra that gets me through is life is short. Do what you love. I'm like, I really want to do that. Like, I really want to learn how to podcast, or I really want to, travel across the country in an RV. But what's stopping me? It's the fear of the unknown. But that unknown place, that not knowing place, is a place of brilliant potential.
Yeah. You know, I think to probably be so comfortable with that to know that knowing place is this place of brilliant potential. You my assumption is that it's got to be trained. And, you know, your past, like, and I'm going to read, like, you have a ton of firsts, like, under your belt in terms of being, whether it's the first woman or one of the first people to do something. And I'm going to just list a number of them because this will give our listeners and viewers just a sense of how diverse and how many times you've probably been in that not knowing place. So here they go. Working for Def Leppard and Metallica as a young woman.
Yeah.
Running a domestic violence awareness nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
Being an internet pioneer in the 80s and the 90s, and then starting Cybergirl and Web Girls as one of the first online, women technology, entrepreneurs. Another one is launching Aviva for the Latina businesswoman right before the internet market crashed.
Yeah.
and even to your most recent venture, Elementa, which is a global women's wellness network, teaching women about cannabis and my favorite, CBD. I'm a huge fan of that. But out of all these first, and I know there's just so many more, we're going to get into books you've written, et cetera, that probably shares much of this experience. But what compels you to jump into where, few women or few people have ever been?
Well, I don't go seeking, well, what's the next opportunity where few women are? It's almost a given that any sort of new technology area or new industry is often led by men, even though in the background or laying the groundwork has often been women. But I watched these industries, I was involved in the internet industry in the very early 90s, and that's the landscape. I didn't get into the internet thinking I'm going to be a woman in this male dominated field. As a hobby, as a writer, I learned how to use a computer. And then as a hobby, I learned how to go onto the internet back then, which was local BBSs, bulletin board systems, Usenet news groups, no web. The web did not exist. And it was a curiosity. It was a curiosity about discovery. Eventually, I learned that other people were also on their computers connecting to the same server and network as I was. That was like a huge revelation. I just thought it was my computer and me. And then as a writer and a communicator, I thought, wow, I can communicate with people. So it was all just this natural curiosity and path. When I started Elementa, I wasn't thinking, let me be the first woman to start a global network for other women. But I was replicating something I started with Web Girls. When I learned about the internet, I was compelled to teach other women about it, because as women, we look at technology different. We look at the internet differently. We're not looking for the fastest computer. We're just looking to connect to good information, health information, communities, support communities. It's just a different thing. Same thing with cannabis. Women are looking for completely different things. Yes, there are women who love to get high, but there was a new swelling of women who wanted to know, can this help my arthritis? Can this help me with menopause? And so it's my personal curiosity that leads me here. And it just so happens that it takes place before a lot of other people get there, or before a lot of other women get there. So I love shining light and paving the way.
That's, that, first of all, I love that you'll shine the light and pave the way, but then also share it with other women in terms of, bring them along. I have to come back to Def Leppard and Metallica, because I'm a total, like, that is so it's like what was that all about? Let's go in that ditch for a moment. I want to hear about
Okay.
your experience working. What was your job? What did you do?
Well, so I was in the music business, and it started out, and it's the same kind of thing I'm talking about. I was working at a temp agency. I had learned how to use a computer only to earn a few more dollars an hour as a temp secretary. I was placed at a bank. I'm working in a bank. I'm literally in the basement of the bank. I'm a dispatcher for ATM repairmen because I knew how to use a computer. And then I heard about a job offer to work in the music business. And, we all love music, and you never really think about, at least back then, I didn't think about where these songs come from and what the industry was. But I did an interview. I was hired. I opened up an office for a regional booking agency. In the course of working there, I met an agent at ICM, International Creative Management, a very, very, very big booking agency for talent. And I ended up moving from North Carolina to New York City, took that job. And then after being there for a couple of years, it was so hard back then in the 80s for women. Literally, the guys who worked in the mailroom were put on the path to become agents. The women who were the assistants or secretaries to actual agents were not allowed, like literally not allowed, until about, I think, the year before I left. Women were finally able to become agents. But I left, and I was given a job offer to work for Metallica and Def Leppard's management company. We also worked with Bruce Hornsby, Rolling Stones, Queensryche, Tesla, Suicidal Tendencies. Anyone who's into metal will know some of those, although Bruce Hornsby obviously was an outlier and my favorite. So it was in that course of taking computer lessons and then moving into a job in an industry I knew nothing about, and then moving to a city, New York City, which scared the heck out of me. But it just led me to that really cool job working and traveling around the world with the bands. So my position, you had asked about my position. I made it up. I started out as a receptionist, and very quickly saw a position to be an artist liaison, is what I called it. I was the glue between the person who wanted the attention of the band members, and I would talk to either the tour manager or the band members, depending on if they were on tour or not. And I would help schedule them, schedule the interviews, schedule the appearances.
That's awesome. Yeah, yeah, I love how unexpected so much of that was for you, like unplanned.
Mhm.
And I think that, in allowing, like, not being driven by a plan or not feeling like you need a plan. I think so many of us, so many women, so many people feel like we need to have the plan or the 5-year plan for what's next in our life, or we hit middle age and we're like, well, what now?
Mhm.
How do you operate from such a place? And I realize you were a younger woman at the time, but even now, like, you just continue to reinvent yourself and you just got resilience, like, flowing out of you. How do you just continue to feel really comfortable without a plan, if you will?
Well, it's interesting because I am a super planner, but
Mm,
I I realize that a plan is a living, breathing, organic thing. I don't like rigidity. I love flexibility, and then resilience. It's so interesting because I do think that that is something somehow was stuck in me. So I'm a Navy brat. My dad was in the military. We traveled a lot. Every 2 to 3 years, we would move. The longest we ever lived in a place was 4 years in Spain. So I was so used to constant change. And that can do two things. It can either create fear of change, rigidity, trauma, or it can create resilience, adaptability, the love of change. And I kind of went that away. And so I'm really not 100% sure how I get through because I think I'm a huge planner, but I do think that that's what it is that if you're not flexible with your plan, it's like a business plan for a company. You want to have a roadmap to follow, but you want to recognize the changing weather. You want to recognize the changing road signs, the construction on the road. You want to know that you can handle and tackle anything that changes. And you always want to have your eye on the horizon. What's out there on the opportunity front? I think that's really what it boils down to. Because if you ask anybody else, they're like, oh my God, she's like such a planner. She's like constantly has to have everything. I like to know the details. I like my roadmap to be really detailed,
mm.
but I'm ready to change it on a dime.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you've got your journey, you've just kind of you haven't had this fear of, like, jumping into the unknown,
Oh, I've had the fear. I've had the fear.
Hmm.
I've had the fear. And not only that, I have been plagued my whole life with extremely low self esteem. And it has played itself out in terrible, terrible ways in my teenage years. It's played itself out in the relationships I've had. And it's not really until I've hit my late 40s, early 50s that I finally I think it was 45. I was just like, you know, am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
Totally, go for it.
I was like,
Be
fuck it.
yourself.
Who cares who cares what anyone thinks anymore? Because I was like the people pleaser to the nth degree. Because ultimately, when you're really living life, you are essentially alone. You can project things and attract people to you, but you're still essentially alone. You can go down this path and you can make an impact, and it can be a positive one or a negative one. It's choice, it's choices. And it's also privilege. Not everyone has the same kinds of opportunities, but why squander opportunities if you have them?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then if you have them, give back.
Mhm.
Reach out, reach behind you, reach underneath, reach over. Just constantly create opportunity for others in any way you can. And even if it's just sharing knowledge,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
can't help all people, but if you're open, honest, and share, you help a lot of people.
Through your point around give back, is obviously a parent. You've written written and co-authored, I think, is it 12 books now?
12 books, yeah.
12 books across things like social media and crowdsourcing and being a mom and an entrepreneur and CBD and cannabis. Talk a little bit about that. Obviously you've got an incredible drive to learn, but this notion to give back, what really pushed you to give back in that way? And I'm sure there's other ways you're giving back too, but wow, writing is just an incredible way to be a teacher to others.
Writing is a gift. If I were to tell you my superpower, like that's one of them. My ability to write, it just flows through me, and I'm incredibly blessed and grateful. I tell people that writing for me is like breathing for other people. So I cannot squander that gift. and and I have to be writing to feel like I'm alive and complete and doing the things that I'm meant to do. So writing for me is incredibly essential. And it is a way to teach. I remember given an assignment in 7th grade, the typical assignment, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I found the piece of paper that I wrote the response. It said, I want to be a writer so I can touch people's lives. That was in 7th grade.
Wow.
And I've been writing stories since kindergarten. I actually still have the little type. I was learning to type in kindergarten. I still have this little story I wrote. It was absolutely ridiculous, but it was really a complete story. It's just been my life. And so having that ability, I love writing books, although honestly, they take over your entire life, everything. So I've been lucky that my family has endured my book writing. Although I wrote a lot of the books before I even got married, but it's a big undertaking to write a book. But I've even written one of my books in 3 weekends.
Wow.
80,000 words.
Wow.
So
that was ready to come out of you, obviously.
yeah,
bursting.
it was the cyber one of the Cyber Girl books, and yeah, it was ready. It was already fully formed. That's the thing that sticks a lot of people. They've got these ideas in their heads, and they just don't know how to get them out. And I really feel asking questions is a really, really great way of getting your answers.
Do you have a favorite out of the 12?
Out of 12 books, oh my gosh,
Or
there's so
are
many.
books like your children, like you're not supposed to pick favorites?
Well, there's meaningful moments from each book. Mom Incorporated, I have to say, is probably one of my most favorite. First of all, it wasn't like a dummies series or an everything book or one of those kinds of books. It was really from my heart. And I partnered with a blogger, she was at the time a mommy blogger, but really she was a lifestyle blogger. And we became really good friends. We went on the road together for that book. And then we wrote Social Media Engagement for Dummies together. But that book was really me and my ideas and thoughts and her ideas and thoughts. Her name is Danielle Smith. Then my second favorite is The Happy Healthy Nonprofit that I wrote with Beth Cantor, because again, that was us. The only thing that, it was limiting is the advice is for everyone, not just nonprofits, but the publisher wanted nonprofit in the title. So those two books were really from my heart, my life experience, my true, let me share who I am and what I know, where the others were much more perfunctory. They're functional books with really good information. But those two, I think, were two of my favorites.
I'm sure through writing and sharing your learning, like you've naturally become a role model, I think, for so many women, Latina women who want to break through, all women who want to break through this barrier of lack of self-confidence, and people pleasing. That's so prevalent. I know I have really worked through being a people pleaser myself. What, in terms of being kind of that role model or helping, using your learning and your experiences to empower other women, what is there, what drives you to want to teach and to empower others?
Well, I know what it's like to be in that place of not knowing,
Mm-hmm.
but also feeling like things are passing me by and I'm not sure where to begin. And anytime I'm in that place, it's just like my natural inclination is, okay, now that I've been through that, let me write about it to help others avoid the pitfalls. I mean, even when my dad was dying, it was a life transforming in a bad way thing. And there were things that nobody told you and things that nobody seemed to be writing about, or at least me, the Google researcher extraordinaire, could not find, like drink lots of water.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is like the weirdest thing. But I literally wrote a post about how to be a warrior for your loved one who is dying. And that was one mega thing. You can become so incredibly dehydrated because you're grieving, you're ignoring yourself, you're paying attention to it's just this horrible situation. And so to me, I thought, I need to put that out there. Drink water. If you are caring, if you're a caregiver and caring for a loved one, if you are sitting at someone's deathbed, drink a lot of water. It was just weird, but it was essential because nothing can function. You can't function properly without hydration. I mean, it's just like a simple thing, but you forget about self-care if you're in that mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just, it was like something I had to do. I had to say it. When one of my very, very first blogs was called Baby Fruit. It still exists. It's still online, Baby Fruit. And it was about my miscarriages. I was one of the first miscarriage bloggers, and I had 4 miscarriages. So it went through a 2-year path through 4 miscarriages. And at one point, my husband was like, "Why are you writing this stuff? Why are you putting these photos up? Why are you revealing this? I don't get it. I don't get it." And I said, if I can touch one woman's life and she can read this and go, "Oh my God, I'm not alone," that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it is, I think that's beautiful. I just, the notion of isolation and thinking that you're the only one um, is prevalent in every hardship I think we face in life. We've heard it this year from women. 2020 has just been a crazy year. You know, we hear it from women in menopause all the time. It's just like
Right.
such a hard change for some women. You know, when do you have any sage advice to the notion of a woman feeling alone, like she's the only one? Because it's a natural human tendency. I don't care if you're male or female. That notion of I'm the only one is always on your mind, especially through challenge.
Through any kind of challenging time. And I go back to what I said earlier. We are actually in essence alone, but we don't have to be lonely, and we don't have to go it alone. So, and that's why I build communities too. That's another thing that I just do. I think you put something out there, like in the case of cannabis and CBD, and now we've expanded to plant medicine. You put something out there, and it's not just information you're sharing. You're trying to connect people to people, because that's, as human beings, we are trying to connect to one another. And so that's what I build that into my content. I build that into what I do. I build that into my online persona, is connect with me. Let's connect. Um, that isolation, it is really devastating
Mm-hmm.
to, and it's counterproductive if we are caregiving for someone who's dying, if we are seeking wellness because we are unwell. uh, Ask questions. And so now I have to go back to what I said, the ask questions piece of it. Ask questions of everybody who will listen. Whenever I'm in a bind, whenever I'm in a difficult situation, thank goodness for the internet from this standpoint. I can just ask questions. I can put it up on Twitter. I can put it to my Facebook friends. Just ask. That's the thing that isolates us the most, is we don't reach out for help. And I've been super guilty of that so many times. I can do it. I can handle it. I don't want to be a burden. That's another big one with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I hate asking for favors. I'm always thinking, okay, if I want that favor, what can I give them in return? So I'm always ready. Can I ask you to do this? Oh, by the way, I'll do this for you. Like it's so hard.
Mm-hmm.
but ask questions, ask for help, ask for favors. Don't be afraid to do that.
Mm-hmm.
People want to help. It helps people feel worthy to be of assistance.
Yeah. Like when you go to someone's house, don't you want like, and they're preparing dinner or something, don't you want to, you're like, how can I help? What,
Yeah.
give me a job. Because it
Yeah.
almost validates, it gives you something to do. I always think
And to
about
do
that.
together, and to do
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
It gives you that shared moment,
Mm-hmm.
of shared work,
Mm-hmm.
of shared experience. So when people say to me, oh, no, don't worry about it, I've got it, I feel very like, oh my gosh, you just put up a wall. Don't reject my offer, because my offer is really not about, can I wash that dish? My offer is, can I share this moment with you fully?
Mm-hmm.
And I think people just take it the wrong way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm in a new position now. So I don't know if we were going to talk about my
Talk a little
reinvention.
bit about it. I totally have. I as a celiac, I've got celiac disease or autoimmune disorder. I love your new. So talk a little bit about it. I won't steal your thunder.
Well, so you've been talking about all these different roles that I've had and all
Yeah.
these different careers and industries I've been in. Well, about 15 years ago, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I started breaking out really badly with mouth ulcers. And I'd always had it. And they call them canker sores. And I've had them since childhood. But my sister was studying to be a naturopathic physician. And she heard that this was this big flare up for me. And it was really painful and very, just felt uncomfortable. She said, cut out gluten. I was like, what's that? She's like, wheat gluten, cut out wheat gluten. Don't eat bread, don't eat pasta, just cut it out from your diet. See what happens. This is 15 years ago, mind you.
So there weren't a lot of other options. Like if you did want bread or crackers or anything.
Not a lot, except in Canada, there was a very big gluten-free movement already. So I was living in Alaska, Canada's right there. Yeah, it was interesting to me because then I went through all the different stages. No, this can't be true, because it cleared up right away. And then when I went back to eating gluten, my mouth would start itching. I would literally have to run to the bathroom and get a toothbrush and scratch like my mouth, because it was itching like immediately after having something with gluten in it. So, but it took my brain a long time to realize that there was a connection between food and what was happening, the reactions in my body. And then I even said to my sister, this whole gluten thing, it's an intestinal digestive thing, but I have it in my mouth. And she looks at me and she's like, where do you think your digestive system starts? Your mouth. So I was getting it in my mouth and in my throat. And to this day, it still happens. When I have hidden gluten, I can all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, my mouth is itching. So, okay, now to the job. I just had to give a little bit of context.
That's good.
Because that's my history, is I do have this health issue, and it's more of a sensitivity. It's an intolerance. I'm now the communications specialist in the marketing team for Gluten Intolerance Group, gluten.org, or GIG for short. And it's amazing. As a mature woman, I've been on the job market for about a year, running Elementa. As an entrepreneur, I was getting to the stage where things were happening in my personal life, and being an entrepreneur was too much. And I started looking for a job, and I got nobody calling me back.
With all your years of experience across technology and entertainment and writing, and it's really incredible. Wow. So yet again, you're at another place where you're feeling alone and kind of rejected.
Oh gosh, yeah, very much so. And I even wrote about it maybe 2 years ago, when I first thought I would maybe I should get a job so I could have a steady paycheck, because entrepreneurial ups and downs was really hard. And I wrote about it on LinkedIn, on my LinkedIn profile. I wrote about, is it because I'm older? Is it because when they look at me, they see silver hair? And I really was exploring the idea that, is this ageism? And honestly, it is a lot. And it's also overqualified, that whole overqualified thing. Well, she's too qualified, therefore she's probably really expensive. She wouldn't accept this salary that we're offering. She's going to be too expensive. And then also the overaccomplished. she's accomplished all those things. There's no way she's going to be sticking around with us, or she's going to intimidate our staff or something like that. And I always go to the not knowing place. I don't know. Let me bring to you what I do know, but I also don't know. And I'm open to learning. So I love this position. The focus is very much on writing and on teaching and on developing compelling content to help those people in all the stages. So from the person who just gets the diagnosis and all those stages that they go through, guiding them with resources, support groups. Like they have support groups as well. Community is a big thing. It just seems like exactly the kinds of things I've created in the past. I can just pop in and create and help and teach and empower.
Yeah. Well,
so I'm on the same path.
In coming through that journey, once again, you're back in the seat of being a learner, and what did you learn about yourself this time in terms of, you weren't starting something again, like you've started so many businesses and groups and initiatives and writing books. This was, I want to be part of something.
Yeah.
Like, where did you dig deep to find the resilience to, keep going in your search?
Well, in my search, boy, after a while, I just get stubborn. And it's weird. This just popped in my head. When I was having miscarriages, eventually it just became, I am going to hold on to a pregnancy. I mean, it was just, I am going to get this done. The overachiever, the type A. But I couldn't give up. I had to make this move for my well-being, for my family's well-being. It just was time to make a shift. Often my shifts are just this natural, oh, look at that opportunity. Look at this new change. Look at this new thing. But this was, I got to make this happen, which made it really hard because, again, it took a year.
Yeah.
But thank goodness it took a year, because this is the best job ever. It's as if somebody said, oh, let's take a look at what Aliza's good at and let's just create this. Well, they kind of did. They kind of met me and said, we're going to make this position because we would like to have you do these things. And I'm learning so much as well, because honestly, this is the organization, the third-party certification group, that when you see the little symbol, the one currently that you probably see, the circle GF, certified gluten-free, very specific circle, they're the ones who do the certification. And they just changed their certification mark. So it's a whole new look. And rolling out in 2021, you really need, if you're looking for gluten-free, you need to look for this mark, because it really represents, they're certified by the certifier of certifiers, if that makes sense. I think it's called the ISO. These are all the things I'm just learning. I would just go to the supermarket, look at the packaging, does it say gluten-free? And I kind of took a lot of it for granted. I didn't realize that only that specific mark meant all of these sort of stringent testing and auditing and all of that. And so as a gluten-free consumer immersed in this world now, I'm learning so much. And I want to share that. I want to let everyone know that you'll look for this, because that's going to give you that feeling of safety. Because when we're unwell, and then when we have to shift our diet to be well, there's a lot of fear there and a lot of confusion and misunderstanding.
Well, just your excitement with certification and a symbol and gluten-free, it's just like, I can see, Aliza, why every venture you've taken on, you've gone deep, and you've just got like infectious curiosity. And I have to say, like, that is part of your secret sauce, in a way. Before I come to our last question, and it's a little bit about Gennev, and we're going to come to the happy face of menopause. We're going to come there in a second, but I know I'm a total, like, I come from the tech industry. I love technology. You were named one of Fast Company's most 100 influential people in technology or women in
So
technology?
Newsweek magazine
Newsweek,
in
sorry.
19, well, no, you're both. So
Okay.
Newsweek magazine in 1995, when I founded Cybergirl, said I was one of the top 50 people who mattered most on the internet. They only had 5 women, and I called them to task for that. And when I wrote to them and I said, I'm so flattered that you included me, but why only 5 women? I could give you 50 more women who you could include. And they said, because we couldn't find anyone. I was like, oh my gosh. And I hear that excuse even to this day when I'm like, why can't you find people of color? Why can't you find more women? Oh, because we couldn't find them. So Fast Company, I think 2009 maybe, named me one of the most powerful women in technology. And it was with a lot of just amazing technologists and everything from programmers to bloggers. And so that was great. I love Fast Company magazine. But yeah, it was gratifying to be out there as a role model. I thought it was essential, like my responsibility to be a role model. I do talk a lot about being Hispanic, and it surprises people. I guess I present very non-color. And I think it's just really important for us to represent, for all of us to represent. And it's important for people to see people who look like them in these interesting positions or high-ranking positions or visible positions. It's back to that wanting to connect and not feeling alone and being able to see ourselves someplace. Sometimes we can't leap until we see an example. And then we're like, wait a minute, she looks like me. She talks like me. She thinks like me. I could be there. It's that extra connection.
Well, that really brings us full circle. How I've gotten to know you, Aliza, and if anyone's been to Gennev.com lately on the homepage, Aliza is the beautiful, smiling, like, just vivacious face of Gennev.com. And we're thrilled, first and foremost, that you have worked with us so that we can use your photo on our website and in our marketing. And but you recently, what I love, you coined yourself as the happy face of menopause. You tweeted out a picture of it, and we loved it. Like, we just kind of jumped on that right away. Talk about being the happy face of menopause, and how does that make you feel? Because there's so many women in menopause that need role models. They need to see women like them, that represent them, that show them they're resilient and they're moving through this, and there's more good ahead than behind.
Well, the first thing that popped in when you asked that is misinformation. If this is, and follow me on this. I have actually been in positions of dispelling myths. So in the music business, all kinds of misinformation about women and women's value, and misinformation even in the cannabis industry. Lots of misinformation that generates fear. Misinformation in gluten and gluten-free industry. Lots of misinformation. So I love dispelling myths, and there are huge myths around menopause, and there's a huge amount of misinformation about it. And the one thing that I tend to see lacking is, what are the benefits of being here? What are the good sides of being here? And is it really that we're losing stuff, or are we gaining something? In every transition in my life and every career change, I've gained so much. There is always going to be loss in every aspect of life, but there is so much more to gain. And then again, it's seeing the possibilities and the opportunities and the joy that can come from change. It's inevitable. It's going to happen to you regardless. So are you going to be depressed about it? Are you going to wallow in sickness? Or are you going to thrive in wellness? And, you get to that age where you get menopause and you kind of realize that expression over the hill, like it never resonated. I didn't know what that meant, but here's midlife. Here's your young life, and then there's the other part of life, and you're kind of looking down going, whoops, guess where I'm at? So how am I going to spend my time and my energy? And, you know, depression runs in my family. And being Hispanic, depression was something nobody spoke about. Mental illness, up until probably very recently and still, is very stigmatized, obviously, in our culture, but in the Hispanic culture, even more so. It's just we don't talk about it. And I didn't learn about depression in my family till I was 41 and having postpartum depression after giving birth. So, knowing what I've learned about mental illness and mental wellness, moving into menopause triggered a lot of things. The mood swings, the irritability, and all of that, that, you know, I had to be better prepared for. I had to care for myself more. I had to learn how to be okay. Mm-hmm. So it is hard. Mm-hmm. It's very different, but it's also, I mean, the things that have opened up and changed for me, I revel in it, and I want to share that. I want to get people to the place of being in that moment of joy, or being in that moment of acceptance, that calm, that peace of acceptance, not to be in a place of fear.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. You know, and I think. And I just say that so earnestly. I think, you know, I was even talking with one of our one of the dietitians and health coaches that work with women at Gennev.com, or at Gennev, and she said the women that are most that find the most value and relief and impact from working with us are those that have come to this place of acceptance, or they have a mindset of acceptance, like, okay, I'm in menopause. Now, what am I going to do about it? You know, to accept where I'm at.
Yeah, I am here. How can I make this moment and this experience the best it can be? And that was the one thing that I was seeking, like, what foods should I be eating or not eating? Oh my gosh, I really need to do more exercise. So how can I stay motivated to reinvigorate my yoga practice in a way that fits into my life today, but that I don't neglect it? And I use this app called Down Dog, and it's brilliant. I can just make a 15-minute or a 45-minute practice for myself, and it tracks me, and I can look at the calendar and go, woo, look at that, I'm on a streak. But that was really important to know, that I had to keep moving. I have to move. I've got to do weight bearing stuff. That kind of knowledge was not natural. I just, you know, you hear, oh, just take care of yourself. Well, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. What does that actually mean? And I have not done any hormones at all. I've done supplements. CBD has been a really valuable supplement for me, but also turmeric has been really good. A lot of the herbs, the plant-based medicines, women have been using them for centuries. Yeah. And they work.
I think we need to rename it. You're the resilient face of menopause, because you really are a symbol of resilience, Aliza. Not only in your career, but through your life, and now in your work, moving into the world of educating and making people who have sensitivities to gluten so much more informed and supported. So, you know, thank you. I think we've got to have you back for a segment on, I think, emotional health, mental illness. It is one of the top rated kind of symptoms, or reported symptoms, I should say, that we hear from women time and again. And I'd love to have you back and just talk a little bit how you've worked through that yourself, because I think, again, we all need role models.
That's a really hard path, and there's been a lot of darkness there, and it does come back, but I'm equipped now with tools, and like I said, the supplements, the taking care of self. I would like to come back and talk about that, because there is still so much stigma around it, and so much not knowing. Yeah. And that not knowing generates a tremendous amount of fear and misinformation. So let's get to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. We're going to put a lot of your books and the resources around not knowing, but things that you've provided to women in the show notes. Thank you, Aliza, for joining us today. It's just been such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
I've wanted to just get to know you for so long, and I love the work that you're doing. And thank you for supporting our work at Gennev and for being someone that women can identify with.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor.
So there you have it. Aliza Sherman is the definition of resilience through so much personal change in life. If you want to learn more about her work, you'll find her books and links to some of the resources we talked about in the show notes of this podcast, and also at gennev.com, and wherever you get your podcasts. And as we close, I have two asks of you. First, please share this podcast with a woman who may need some inspiration right now, especially if she's feeling alone, like we talked about in our conversation today. Second, please comment on our podcast. Let us know what's resonating with you. And also, please like us on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts. The more people who like us, the more women will discover the information that we have to share. So till next time, I hope you have a wonderful week. Stay healthy and go forth and be resilient.